Discover how a touching name transformed a cold millionaire and changed their lives forever. Thomas Harrington strode through the expansive hall of his family's ancient Victorian house in Willow Creek, a ghostly silence shrouding the air. With every step, he felt the weight of the past pressing against him, a past he had dismissed with the ease of a business transaction. In his world, emotions were collateral, and family matters were mere auxiliary figures in a portfolio of wealth. But now, an unexpected inheritance loomed, pulling him back into a life and a family he had long forgotten, or perhaps chosen to forget. As he rummaged through the attic, dust swirled in the shafts of light, irritating his nostrils as he brushed aside remnants of a history he found haunting. Among the scattered boxes, he stumbled upon an old scrapbook. Its leather cover, cracked with age, mirrored the fragility of memories he had neglected. With a hesitant breath, he flipped through its pages, not prepared for the warmth that flooded his chest as he was engulfed by images of laughter, family gatherings, a mother whose smile had always been chalked up to the abstract ledger of his life. But something stirred as he turned the pages. The fervent script of his grandmother, a woman he only knew through hushed whispers of compassion and service. "Reconnect with your roots, Thomas," one letter implored. "Embrace the love that binds our family." Each word was a bridge spanning the quiet chasm he had dug between himself and his past. At that moment, layers of equilibrium began to unravel, and he wrestled with a profound sense of shame as he realized his cold pursuits had led him nowhere. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The walls of his empire, once a fortress of success, felt like shackles, tightening around him with each passing second. He was caught between his ruthless ambition and the allure of something unquantifiable. Love, community, belonging. Was he about to choose identity over income? He closed his eyes, but the recurring images of family faces in distress broke through like a floodgate. Each drew him in, whispering their burdens, begging him to act. In those vulnerable moments of clarity, he recognized their fight for dignity clashing with the sterile numbers on his spreadsheets. Navigating the charity event he once scoffed at, his steps faltered as he observed the crowd that stood resolutely before him, sharing their fears with a raw sincerity that knotted his studit. They lived in a world of fragility, yet he had only ever calculated profits. The desires and hopes expressed in breathless tones shattered the glassy exterior he had built around his heart. Each word he heard struck a nerve, forcing him to confront the moral abyss he had allowed himself to fall into. As he lingered at the precipice of a decision, amidst familiar faces filled with hope and need, he felt the ground shift beneath him. All eyes were on him, waiting for something. Would he elevate himself above them, or would he embrace the legacy of love his grandmother fought for? The opulent empire he had crafted loomed heavy, and the intimate warmth of family felt intoxicatingly real. Torn between two worlds, the choice simmered in the air, electric and punchy, yet agonizingly elusive. As Thomas stood at the epicenter of conflicting emotions, each individual face before him held a mirror to his own potential to change. He felt a chill as he surveyed the room, the cacophony of voices urging him toward personal revelation. They were people whose struggles resonated deeply, stories intertwined with hope and despair. In that charged atmosphere, he was forced to reconcile the remnants of his heart with the shadows of his ambition that had grown darker over time. The realization struck him like a punch. His wealth had not been a shield, but a cage. An inheritance of responsibility and compassion beckoned him, challenging the predilection for isolation he had constructed. As he peered into the eyes of strangers, he felt an urgency. Their needs became a burning question he could no longer ignore. What if he used his resources to foster change rather than simply profit? The thought alone sent tremors through his carefully constructed world. He sensed a new kind of energy building, a flicker of purpose igniting within him. It was unfamiliar, yet exhilarating. No longer just a corporate titan maneuvering through a world of cold transactions, he was becoming a man confronted with a deeper calling. What had seemed like inconveniences, their pleas, their pain, started to morph into possibilities for connection. Yet doubt lingered like an unwelcome friend. Could he truly shift the paradigm that had defined him for so long? Each invested dollar in his empire felt like a betrayal of this burgeoning awakening. Could he sustain a dual existence, one that allowed for wealth while also enveloping the warmth of humanity? The very idea felt dissonant. He could almost hear the whispers of his past, purchasing power, echoing in reproach. In a moment of clarity, Thomas made a choice. He rounded the room with purpose, extending offers of support, tangible commitments to those who looked to him for help. He spoke with assuredness born of newfound fire, his voice carrying a weight of sincerity that felt foreign but liberating. As he navigated through conversations, he began to notice details he once overlooked, the glimmer of gratitude in a mother's eyes or the tears of a child expressing hope. Yet, amidst the euphoria of these genuine interactions, he felt an undercurrent of fear. Navigating the delicate balance of his ambition and newfound commitment felt precarious. Each handshake could solidify his resolve or threaten to unravel the fabric of everything he had known. Doubt had crept in, whispering that his past self may seek retribution, a reversion to calculations rather than connections. Then, amidst the sea of faces, a figure stepped forward. Jen, a local activist who had been working tirelessly with people affected by the rising costs of living, challenged him directly. Her voice was unwavering, piercing through the superficial pleasantries. "You have the means to change lives, Thomas, but are you ready to face what that really means for you? What will it cost?" Her words resonated deeply, shaking the core of his gradual transformation. He felt the weight of her question linger in the air, a challenge to not only embrace this path, but to define who he truly was within it. The intensity of the moment drew everyone's gaze to him, amplifying the tension. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the allure of old habits pull him back into the shadows? As he took a deep breath, the floor felt unstable beneath him, yet within that instability lay the promise of change. He needed to decide, stand on the precipice he had created, or plunge into this new identity that called to him with a ferocity he could not ignore. But before he could articulate his commitment to the room, a sudden commotion outside broke through the facade of his carefully orchestrated life. Shouting, chaos. What was happening? The atmosphere shifted, and in that moment, everything he had been laboring to discover was about to be challenged in ways he could never expect. Thomas's mind raced as the commotion grew louder, his heart pounding in sync with the shouts outside. He turned, instinctively seeking the source of the disturbance, every fiber of his being torn between remaining in the moment that had ignited a possible transformation and rushing outside to understand the chaos unfurling just beyond the walls. Jen's words echoed in his mind, demanding attention amidst the tumult. Was he truly ready to face the implications of his wealth and newfound ambition? With a deep intake of breath, he stepped toward the exit, curiosity and determination edging him on despite the fear that clung to his thoughts like smoke. As he emerged from the building, a scene unfolded that jolted him into action. A small crowd had gathered, voices raised in indignation as they protested the curtailing of local services, each face reflecting desperation and anger. The sight shocked him. For a moment, he faltered. caught between who he had been and who he aspired to become. A man in the front row, his face lined with years of struggle, saw Thomas's arrival and shouted, You represent everything wrong with this system. We need to be heard." The raw intensity of the man's plea seized Thomas. More than ever, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing upon him, a need to respond. That moment crystallized in his mind. Could he stand by as a mute spectator to lives fractured by inequity? Forced into the role he always shunned, he found himself stepping forward into the crowd. "I will listen," he declared, his voice rising above the din. The crowd quieted slightly, eyes darting toward him with both suspicion and the flicker of hopeful curiosity. As he absorbed their stories, each one intertwined with loss and dreams unfulfilled, he began to feel the urgency of their plight seep into his veins. A mother shared how the lack of affordable housing had forced her family into a cramped apartment, while another person spoke of a neighbor whose illness had gone untreated due to exorbitant medical costs. Each account resonated painfully, and he felt their desperation weigh heavily on his conscience. While he attempted to grasp the full scope of what they were proposing, a call for change that would require more than lip service from someone of his perceived status, the dialogue morphed into a cacophony of needs. Thomas quickly realized that they weren't merely clamoring for charity, they were demanding an advocate, an ally willing to fight alongside them for systemic change. The shift was seismic. With every exchange, the lingering fear that had haunted him ebbed away, replaced by a fervor for action. Yet, amidst this realization lay a gnawing uncertainty. Could he indeed reconcile the dual identities he was being thrust into? His world as a businessman thrived on profit and loss, while this new reality demanded empathy and partnership. In that instant, as connections forged in urgency filled the air, he understood the truth of Jen's inquiry. What will it cost? The cost was not just monetary, but one of heart and integrity, a reckoning of the values he had long hidden beneath spreadsheets and board meetings. Determined but engulfed by self-doubt, a question swirled in his mind. What would it take to shift the paradigm from self-interest to genuine service? He knew he needed allies, champions who could act as a bridge between their struggles and the resources he possessed. But who could he trust in this labyrinth of distrust left by too many broken promises? The pressing need for action ignited a voice within him, urging him to not only listen, but also to take a stand that would reverberate beyond this moment. Yet, as he pondered alliances, he felt a foreboding sense that opposition would rise not just from society's structures, but within himself. Was he ready to fully embrace the cost of commitment? As he looked into the faces before him, their hopes intertwining with his own burgeoning purpose, a sense of gravity settled over him. He needed clarity. With a rush of resolve, he vowed to return, to gather more voices and resources to challenge the existing system. Emboldened by his promise to act, he prepared to seek answers that would not only define his path, but might just illuminate the darker corners of his past. The moment of truth was close at hand. As the crowd began to disperse with tentative optimism, he felt a looming challenge resurrect, one that would test his resolve and the very fabric of the change he intended to forge. Could he confront the voices from his past seeking to undermine his present? And would he rise above them, as he was beginning to envision for himself? The thought settled uncomfortably in his gut, propelling him further toward the next steps he had to take and the choices he would soon have to face. The sun was slipping below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light on the remnants of the gathering. As Thomas retreated from the lingering memories of their stories, he felt the pull of the evening's commitments. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, a reminder of the corporate obligations that clamored for his attention. Each notification felt like a weight pressing against his budding resolve, tugging him back into the world that now felt increasingly alien. He glanced around, assessing the fading energy of the crowd. Their collective hope weighed on him like a tangible force, igniting conflicting emotions of guilt and ambition. Thomas was no longer just a businessman. He was becoming something more complex, something he could barely define. Was he prepared to take this leap of transformation, to invert his usual motivations from profit to purpose? As he meandered back through the crowd, he made a choice, not just to gather resources, but to invite dialogue. His determination solidified. It was time to break down his previous barriers. With each step, he rehearsed the conversations he would initiate, ideas he would propose. Would his perceived authority make him an ally or a pawn in their minds? "Thomas," a voice called out, clear and familiar. It was Jen, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "You really stayed out there." "I had to," he replied, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. "They need someone to help them. I can't ignore it any longer. They'll want to know you care, not just what you can do for them." Jen's insight pierced through his defensiveness. Her point echoed his internal conflict. Genuine care means vulnerability, and vulnerability could breed resistance. But the flames sparked within him every time he recalled the faces illuminated by hope, urging him to act not merely as a benefactor, but as a partner. "I'm planning to arrange meetings," he began, his mind racing ahead, "to listen to their needs and find solutions I can provide as a resource. It's time I built a bridge." Her eyebrow arched slightly. "Did it feel like a bridge or a bandage when you were out there?" He paused, struck by the gravity of her question. His instinct was to shape solutions quickly, to fix problems. Yet he realized genuine change required steadfast patience. "You're right," he admitted, drawing in a "I need to understand their roots first." The conversation shifted, becoming a practical exploration of strategies. They discussed coalition building, how to generate trust and transparency, each idea reinforcing this new identity he was forging. Was this possible? Could he step far enough out of his comfort zone to truly support others instead of merely positioning himself as a savior? As evening fell, his mind shifted to his next steps, knowing he couldn't embark on this journey alone. The latent fear that had gripped him earlier resurfaced, pushing at the edges of his confidence. What if, despite his efforts, he wasn't taken seriously? What if they saw him as just another wealthy outsider, unsuited to empathize with their struggles? Determined not to allow doubt to immobilize him, he resolved to reach out further, locating local advocates, community leaders, anyone who could help him blend his newfound purpose into actionable strategies. Thomas had to confront his past methods of operation and reshape them into a sustainable approach to service. At his core was an undeniable truth. He was not just a reflection of his wealth, but of his decisions, values, and, most importantly, his commitments. A chilled wind drifted through the trees, invigorating his senses and clearing his mind as he forged ahead, weaving the future he needed within his grasp. But for every step he took toward this new realm, shadows of his prior self loomed larger. Could he truly shed his old identity? The reminder of the stark, transactional nature of his past roles echoed in his thoughts, fueling his determination, but casting doubt. As he stood on the precipice of significant change, he sensed this haunting duality was not only his greatest challenge, but also his opportunity for personal redemption. The night deepened around him, and with it, a question loomed larger than before. What hidden elements of his character would emerge as he pushed forward, and at what cost? The night was pregnant with possibility and danger, drawing him toward the unforeseen, spiraling into the depths of confrontations he had yet to face. Would he overcome the haunting echoes of his past self, or would they pull him back before he could fully step into the person he aspired to be? The next morning, Thomas awoke with a singular focus. He would not just be an observer. He would move boldly into the chaos of a new reality. The quiet of his opulent bedroom felt stifling as his mind raced with possibilities. No longer could he limit himself to the confines of boardroom strategies. Each decision demanded an understanding rooted in empathy and connection. Before stepping into the day, he took a moment to breathe, allowing the weight of his decision to sit with him. Fear and anticipation danced within him. What would it mean to bridge the gap between his past and the vision he now clung to? His coffee cooled in the mug as he stared at the untouched landscape of his life, a pattern that had grown monotonous and, frankly, unfulfilling. He picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts. An idea hit him. He would start with the individuals in his network, reaching out to those who held influence in the community. This required a strategy that was actionable yet principled. He had connections, but could he convert them into opportunities for genuine dialogue? Placing the phone down, he pushed aside thoughts of hesitation. He would invite them for coffee, one by one, to learn about their experiences, insights, and challenges. Arriving at the cafe he had chosen for its low-key atmosphere, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. The steady murmur of conversations blended into a backdrop as he waited. With each minute that passed, his resolve tightened, but so did the knot in his stomach. It was time to confront the ghosts of his previous intentions toward business. He was no longer just networking for profit. This was an opportunity for human connection. When Sarah walked in, a community leader known for her advocacy work, Thomas felt the tension release slightly. She approached with warmth, her presence igniting an undercurrent of camaraderie. They exchanged pleasantries before diving into a conversation that he hoped would illuminate the needs he had only glimpsed the night before. "So, Thomas, what brings you to our corner of the world today?" she asked, her eyes scanning his face for sincerity. He hesitated, reflecting on his past motives that often revolved around self-interest. "I'm hoping to understand better," he admitted, "what your community truly needs and how I might leverage my resources effectively." She studied him for a moment before nodding. "That's a good start, but remember, people don't just need resources. They need to feel seen and heard. What can you offer beyond money?" Thomas felt a rush of defensiveness, but he caught himself. He had spent too long equating wealth with worth. "I can offer my willingness to listen, to learn from you and others about your experiences," he replied, and his voice held a tremor of authenticity he hadn't anticipated. As they conversed, the layers began to peel away. Sarah spoke about the systemic issues, the voices that often go unheard, and the weight of expectation placed on her shoulders to effect change. Thomas realized this was not merely a chat, it was a lesson. He was not the hero here. He was an ally, and what mattered was forging a connection built on trust and shared purpose. "Development is a marathon, not a sprint," she remarked, grounding him in the reality of long-term engagement. "Rebuilding relationships takes time." He nodded, absorbing her words. Patience was a skill he had rarely practiced under the pressure of corporate targets. The obstacles that lay ahead began to take form in his mind. How much he would have to change in not just his approach, but in himself. Could he really embrace the discomfort that would come with remaining vulnerable? With the conversation winding down, a fresh conviction settled over him. He felt the shift within, the beginning of real growth. He would dive deeper, face each question head-on, and confront the very aspects of himself that caused friction. As they parted ways, Thomas noticed a lingering sense of possibility, but something gnawed at him, a reminder that embracing this new path might also expose him to challenges he had not yet anticipated. Would he lose connections more comfortable to maintain? With a deep breath, he realized that the real test was yet to come. How far would he be willing to push against his innate tendencies of control in pursuit of something genuine? As he stepped back into the bustling street, he wondered if he could endure the growing pains of transformation without retreating to the safety of his former self. Little did he know that the next meeting would not only test his resolve, but challenge the very fabric of his identity again. The real confrontation was approaching, one that would force him to reconcile his past with the man he longed to be. As days turned into a week, the initial pulse of excitement began to ebb, and the complexities of his new mission wrapped around Thomas like a dense fog. He had met with a handful of individuals since his conversation with Sarah, each coffee stemming from his desire to gain insight, yet drawing him back to his own internal conflicts. The more he listened, the more the cracks in his previously unassailable persona started to widen. This day brought an invitation to meet with Michael, a former colleague whose career had taken a dive, yet whose passion to impact the community remained alight. Huddled in a corner of the same cozy cafe, he found Michael animatedly recounting his struggles. "It's not easy to keep fighting when the odds are stacked against you. They want quick fixes, but I'm in for the long haul," Michael asserted, fervor illuminating his face. Thomas listened, letting each word penetrate the walls he'd erected around himself. "What keeps you going?" he asked. Even as the question left his lips, he felt an edge of disbelief creeping in. "My name. My father gave it to me, and it means gift from God. Knowing that I was meant for something greater gives me strength," Michael explained, his eyes gleaming with conviction. "Do you think others feel that way?" Thomas ventured, sensing the shift within himself as he began to reflect on his own identity. He had been driven by titles and wealth, a fantasy he could now see was constructed on shaky foundations. "You bet, but many don't know how to reach for it. They're lost in the grind, unable to see their potential," Michael said, his voice a cocktail of hope and frustration. That phrase resonated. Lost in the grind. It echoed through Thomas's mind. He realized he had often overlooked the human element in the pursuit of results. Was he now, too, lost in his grind? In seeking solace through connections, had he merely distracted himself from real change? Unbeknownst to him, taking a sip of his coffee triggered a revelation. He could leverage more than just resources. He could leverage his own story. Perhaps his name, once a badge of privilege, could evolve into something more. He started to ponder, maybe in shedding the layers of his financial identity, he could inspire others to believe in transformations, just as Michael had. As the conversation deepened, Michael shared the stories of people he knew who grappled with systemic issues far beyond their control. Thomas felt his level of discomfort rise again as he recognized that every insight was dragging him closer to an unsettling conclusion. He would have to confront not just an industry, but also the privilege he had grown accustomed to. When their time wrapped up, Thomas left the cafe with more than just new insights. He felt a growing urgency to act. What would it look like to genuinely align his skills with the community's needs? The question gnawed at him, intensifying with every beat of his heart. The drive home was almost automatic, yet a storm brewed inside of him. He realized he was at a precipice, with the echoes of past habits tempting him to retreat. The question lingered. When would he face the ghosts of his complacency? Arriving home, his thoughts raced faster than his car had, and he felt the weight of what was to come pressing down on him. He had tasted vulnerability with Sarah, and now Michael's conviction made his own seem flimsy at best. Tonight, the consequences of his choices started to crystallize. Each conversation, matched with reflection, was pulling at the threads of his identity, tugging him towards a reckoning he could no longer ignore. As he stood in front of his reflection, Thomas couldn't help but revisit the notion of change. The road ahead may demand more than strategic plans. How would he blend his newfound awareness with his business acumen? His next encounter would be pivotal. What would happen when he had to tackle the uncomfortable truth lurking in his own motivations? The real challenge awaited him, and with it, he could either break away from his past or bind himself to a future of authentic purpose. The following day began with Thomas grappling with the insights from his conversation with Michael. The early morning light glinted off his office's glass walls, yet the brightness felt more like an affront than a comfort to his restless mind. The smell of coffee wafted through the air as he stepped into his workspace, but the usual routine felt hollow. He found himself staring at the spreadsheets sprawled across his desk, numbers and graphs that had once brought him pride, now eliciting an unsettling feeling of disconnection. Mulling over his conversation with Michael, he pondered the deeper significance of the challenges they had discussed. His phone buzzed incessantly, messages from colleagues requesting his attention, but they fell on deaf ears. Each ping echoed the reality of busy work that had consumed him in the past. He needed to find clarity, not just efficiency. The day dragged on. Meetings felt mechanical, and he could scarcely engage. It didn't take long for him to realize that merely attending to business still left him feeling unsettled. The more he listened to the noise around him, the louder Michael's words grew in his mind. People were lost in their grind, and here he was, stranded in his own. He suddenly questioned whether he was complicit in perpetuating that grind. By the time lunch rolled around, Thomas had decided. He needed to break free from the cycle. He dialed a contact he had worked with previously, a small nonprofit that assisted underprivileged youth. It wasn't a business call to discuss funding or partnerships, but rather a request for a meeting. He knew he needed to immerse himself in a world beyond comfort zones, a world where his battle with privilege could start to emerge. When they scheduled a conversation for later in the week, a sense of urgency washed over him. However, the excitement was quickly countered by a rising tide of doubt. Who was he to wade into such complex struggles? Was he merely a tourist in these realms? The gnawing questions only intensified his resolve. Plagued by his insecurities but emboldened by his drive, he tried to compartmentalize his racing thoughts. He opened his journal, a practice that had given him comfort in the past but felt foreign now. As he wrote, he found himself reflecting not just on his experiences, but allowing vulnerabilities to surface. It became a raw dialogue with himself. What did it truly mean to make an impact? To be a conduit of change rather than its architect? As the ink scratched onto paper, he realized the key wasn't merely in leveraging his story. It was about connecting authentically with others' narratives. The delicate interplay of vulnerability and strength unfurled before him. He didn't need to have full answers. He needed to initiate the dialogue, and that was where his value could emerge. His pen halted as a thought struck him. Previous success had come from his ability to weave narratives for profit, often relying on statistics and projections. What if he now applied that same skill towards storytelling with purpose? He envisioned crafting frameworks that might help others find their voices, compelling them to share rather than simply consume. That evening, as he faced yet another rendition of his reflection, he noticed something shifting. He wasn't merely pondering change, he was on the verge of action. Tension turned into a palpable sense of responsibility, and as he pondered what his next step should be, he couldn't shake off an ominous feeling lingering just beneath the surface. Was he ready to face the complexities this new path would demand? In his heart, he felt an unforeseen urgency to align his skills with tangible outcomes for those he aspired to help. And yet, the gravity of his journey weighed heavily on him. The question now loomed larger than before. Would he find the courage to transform himself while aiding those around him? With a sense of determination swelling within, Thomas realized the path ahead would not be a linear one. Yet clarity was slowly taking form, and he found himself yearning for answers. Introspection and action would generate a tension that could either lead towards redemption or traps of superficiality. As he picked up his phone once more, a message lit up his screen from Sarah. "We need to talk," it read. The words simultaneously intrigued and terrified him. Was it a call for accountability or a reminder of past choices? He took a deep breath. The moment was ripe for confrontation. Would this be the link he needed to fully embrace his emerging purpose? Thomas sat in his office chair, the pulse of anxiety thrumming in his temples. The message from Sarah, so innocuous in its phrasing, resonated with an urgency that drowned out the distractions of ringing phones and clattering keyboards. He had always been skilled at navigating the complexities of business relationships, but now interactions felt imminent and raw. What could Sarah want? Was she a reflection of his failures or a guiding light toward his new venture? He stared at his laptop, yet the screen turned into a blur as thoughts spiraled. What hadn't he shared with Sarah, his confidant? The stakes felt higher. The decision to meet with the nonprofit wasn't simply professional, it was personal. He was ready to confront his own privileged detachment. But was he prepared for this conversation? With a sudden determination, he stood up and walked to the large window overlooking the city. The sprawling urban landscape mirrored the chaos in his mind. Thousands of stories unraveled at his feet, each dependent on connection, understanding, and empathy he had been lacking. His soul seemed to weep for the voices unheard. He was living in a bubble that felt more like a cage. He hastily made a plan for the upcoming meeting with the nonprofit. If he was going to reach out to a world beyond his comfort, he needed to do it thoughtfully and purposefully. He began outlining how he might communicate his intentions during that discussion. Each bullet point on the paper became a stepping stone toward authenticity. "What do I really want?" he whispered to himself. It wasn't just about narrative strategies anymore. It was about forging a relationship that could kindle change. As he sketched out ideas, his thoughts wandered. Thomas recalled the stories he had read about impactful social entrepreneurs, their savviness about leveraging their backgrounds for growth and progress. They didn't just analyze numbers, they dove into the emotional fabric of their missions. Before he knew it, hours had slipped away. He finally sat back, a sense of accomplishment dawning within. Yet a tremor of doubt flickered through him. Was this all just bravado, a mask for insecurity? As the evening wore on and the office dimmed, he felt a familiar grip of skepticism clenching around his heart. What if his intentions fell flat? What if he couldn't translate his vision into something meaningful? Conflicted, Thomas picked up his phone, scrolling through the pictures of happy faces at past charity events and smiling children embracing opportunities he had once aided. They served as a beacon, reminding him why he needed to press forward. Beneath the layers of self-doubt and privilege lay a yearning to unlock potential, including his own. His mind returned to Sarah's text, amplifying the tension within him. The longer he delayed, the more daunting the conversation loomed. After a moment of indecision, he texted back. When and where? The instant reply was rapid, almost eager. They settled on a coffee shop at 8 the next morning. A shadow of dread hung over him. What would they discuss? Would she hold him accountable for his life choices? With a sinking feeling, he realized Sarah represented a connection to his past that was both irreplaceable and challenging. She had seen the man he had been. Would Thomas be brave enough to show her the new version he aspired to become? As the city lights flickered to life beneath the dusk, he felt a chill of resolve mingling with fear. Tomorrow, he would confront both Sarah and himself, unveiling deeper truths. With that thought, he closed his laptop and left the office, an unpredictable transformation crackling in the air. When he opened the door to the coffee shop the next morning, a rush of warmth enveloped him, but so did a wave of uncertainty. The questions simmered beneath his skin as he spotted Sarah seated at a corner table. Was he ready to face the reality of his decisions? The moment to find out was now. Would their conversation become a bridge to understanding or a mirror reflecting past choices? The stakes were higher than ever, and as he approached her table, Thomas felt the imperative weight of the crossroads before him. Thomas drew in a breath, steadying himself as he approached Sarah's table. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the low hum of morning chatter, creating an oddly soothing backdrop against the palpable tension brewing within him. Sarah looked up, her expression warm yet searching, as if she could sense the tumult inside him. "Good to see you, Thomas," she said, motioning for him to sit. The sincerity in her voice offered a momentary balm to his nerves. "Thanks for meeting with me," he replied, slipping into the chair across from her, his heart racing. This meeting could either be a leap forward or a painful reminder of everything he had yet to accomplish. As they settled into the conversation, he focused on her eyes, where he saw both expectation and compassion. "I've been thinking about what you said in the text," Sarah began, leaning slightly forward. "You seem to be on the verge of something. What's changed for you?" Thomas felt the weight of her question settle deep within him. How could he articulate the internal shift that had been occurring? The stirrings of something he hadn't been brave enough to name until recently. He hesitated, searching for the right words, feeling the gravity of his privilege pressing down. "It's hard to explain," he started, gripping his coffee cup tightly, "but I've realized that my work doesn't just impact numbers or profit margins. It's about people, stories that matter. I've been detached, I guess." The confession felt like an unshackling of sorts. Admitting the truth to Sarah felt enormous. She nodded slowly, her expression shifting to one of encouragement. "That's a significant realization, Thomas. It's much easier to stay in the comfort of strategy and analytics. So what's next? How do you want to connect your work with that realization?" He swallowed hard. "I'm meeting with a nonprofit next week. They're doing wonderful things. But I need to shift from being just a donor to a partner in their vision. I want to be involved, not just writing checks. I want to make a real difference." Sarah's eyes lit up with an understanding that felt comforting. "That's a significant realization, Thomas. It's much easier to stay in the comfort of strategy and analytics. So what's next? How do you want to connect your work with that realization?" He swallowed hard. "I'm meeting with a nonprofit next week. They're doing wonderful things. But I need to shift from being just a donor to a partner in their vision. I want to be involved, not just writing checks. I want to make a real difference." Sarah's eyes lit up with an understanding that felt comforting. "That's an ambitious goal. What's holding you back?" His impulse was to blame his fear of failure, the terror that his attempts might be futile. But facing Sarah, he couldn't mask his vulnerabilities. What if I can't translate this newfound energy into impact? What if it's just an idea without substance? Her gaze softened. "Maybe that's where you start, in the uncertainty. It's okay to be afraid, but it doesn't have to paralyze you. That fear can also teach you, push you to find solutions." As he absorbed her words, something clicked within him. The fear, rather than a barrier, could become a compass, guiding him toward authenticity. "You're right. I need to lean into the uncertainty, to be vulnerable and open about what I don't know." "That's the spirit," she said, with a smile that made him feel seen, not judged. "And remember, building real connections takes time. You might stumble, but that's part of the process." The conversation deepened, shifting from the uncertainties of doing to the thrilling prospect of becoming. They shared ideas, sparking a dialogue that rekindled his passion for meaningful engagement. He felt lighter, as if a layer of guilt and self-judgment was peeling away, revealing a clearer sense of purpose beneath. Yet, as the meeting wound down, reality crept back in, reminding him of the hurdles ahead. I guess I need to prepare myself for some uncomfortable conversations, he mused, especially with people who may not agree with my sudden change of heart. Sarah leaned closer, her intuition sharp. And what if these conversations lead to deeper connections? Sometimes conflict can illuminate paths you never considered before. Her words echoed in his mind, suggesting a complicated journey ahead. Would he find the courage to confront not only potential rivals, but also his own ingrained assumptions? As they concluded their meeting, a shift had occurred within him, a burgeoning awareness of his capacity for change amidst uncertainty. However, the path forward loomed large, a mass of tangled possibilities with no clear end. He had taken the first step, but it felt like only a prelude to the larger, bolder narrative he was about to write. With a newfound resolve building inside him, he stood up, prepared to tackle the next chapter of his journey. But as he walked away from the coffee shop, he couldn't shake the question lingering in the back of his mind. How would others react to this revitalized version of him? The time had come to face not just Sarah, but the people who might resist his transformations. How would they perceive his efforts to bridge the divide between privilege and purpose? This was more than just a business endeavor. It was a fundamental recalibration of his identity. The transformation within Thomas Harrington had reached a critical juncture. As he stepped into the bustling street, the city alive around him, he felt the pulse of potential coursing through his veins. No longer merely the cold millionaire, he was evolving into a catalyst for meaningful change. His meeting with Sarah had been illuminating. For once, he recognized the urgency of redefining not just his actions, but his identity, to align his wealth with purpose. He recalled her words echoing in his mind. Building real connections takes time. Time. That simple concept weighed heavily, yet held the promise of what lay ahead. Taking the next steps towards initiating substantive change began to crystallize in his mind. The meeting with the nonprofit loomed on the horizon, and he felt a combustible mix of exhilaration and trepidation. Confidently, he committed to arriving not with the intent to dictate outcomes, but with the willingness to listen, genuinely listen. That was the crux of the shift he sought, and it felt invigorating. Yet self-doubt lingered as shadows in his new landscape. Could he truly embrace this role of a partner rather than a benefactor? He was well aware of the challenges that awaited him, the tightrope walk of navigating existing power dynamics, the likelihood of escalating tensions where privilege meets need. Yet the thought that ignited him was not merely about those apprehensions. It was about the immense potential for impact. On the day of the meeting, Thomas dressed intentionally. His suit felt both heavy and freeing, representing a bridge between the man he had been and the one he aspired to be. Each step towards the nonprofit's modest office felt monumental. Arriving, he was immediately enveloped in a welcoming atmosphere, rich with energy dedicated to transforming lives. Here was no boardroom. Instead, it was a space where stories intermingled with courage and resilience. As faces turned to meet him, he exhaled, squashing the instinct to conceal behind titles or numbers. He introduced himself to the group, sharing the essence of his transformation rather than reciting accolades. "I am here," he said, "simply to learn and to engage." The palpable shift in the room was undeniable. He had crossed a threshold, no longer standing atop a pedestal, but alongside those whose stories mattered, stories he needed to hear. Initially, words flowed uneasily amidst cautionary expressions. Encouraged, Thomas began to share his own evolution, how he had chosen a path of privilege for too long, and the awakening that had stirred within him. Initially, words flowed uneasily amidst cautionary expressions. Encouraged, Thomas began to share his own evolution, how he had chosen a path of privilege for too long, and the awakening that had stirred within him. Each revelation was met with scrutiny, yet from that scrutiny came understanding, and from understanding emerged connection. "What do you intend to change, really?" one woman challenged him, her voice steady yet insistent. The question struck him. It was at once an inquiry and a challenge. "I want to change the relationship between wealth and responsibility, to foster genuine partnership rather than transactional interactions," he replied, heart racing but conviction steady. Her nod was subtle but illuminating. "That's a start. But remember, it's not enough to just listen. Engage your network with intention and be transparent about your own journey." The conversation deepened, unfolding into an enriching tapestry of perspectives. As they shared ideas focused on sustainability, collective action, and systemic solutions, Thomas felt an empowerment swell within him. Each connection forged solidified the foundation for an impactful partnership rooted in authenticity. In those discussions, he saw real potential. They envisioned not just initiatives, but movements, a collective voice where resources aligned seamlessly with need, enabling opportunities for everyone involved. It became clear that his journey had to incorporate the voices of those he sought to help. Eventually, as the meeting concluded, Thomas felt invigorated yet humbled. He glanced around the room, absorbing the energy of the collective vision they had sparked together. He realized this profound shift away from his past behaviors marked a significant victory for him, not merely in professional terms, but personally and morally. Walking out into the sunlight, a sense of achievement enveloped him. He had taken tangible steps towards redefining not just his business pathway, but his fundamental purpose. Recognizing the conflation of empathy and integrity had fortified his resolve. He no longer wished to remain an outsider wielding privilege without attachment. Days turned into weeks, and with each stride forward, Thomas consecrated his commitment to an evolving narrative of service. He created platforms that celebrated not only his journey, but those of others, amplifying their stories. He organized community dialogues, infusing his resources into projects that recognized the systemic issues at play. The more he contributed, the more he transformed. Recognition soon followed. Award ceremonies honoring community advancements invited him to share his narrative not as a triumphant transformation, but as a collective journey. Each accolade felt deserved and bolstered his resolve. The satisfaction derived did not rest solely in awards, but in the lives impacted along the way. He stood at a gathering where people recounted achievements, empowered by shared efforts, sharing dreams that extended beyond immediate constraints. The moment crystallized for him like an epiphany. His past, as a cold millionaire, had not defined him. His choices from that point on would encapsulate this growth journey, that of an ally in pursuit of change. Thomas Harrington had conquered the emotional abyss that once anchored him, demonstrating a capacity for genuine transformation. His roots grew deeper in the soil of humility and connection, yielding fruits of impact. At this moment, he recognized that change is not a solitary path. It is an evolving narrative entwined with others' hopes and aspirations. As he walked into the horizon of possibility, a sense of accomplishment surged through him, a solid confidence building with each step. He was a man transformed, recognized not by wealth, but by the love and empathy he had finally embraced. You need to subscribe now to the channel to embark on more exclusive emotional journeys like this. This is the moment to show your support and hit that like button now to help feed the algorithm. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who must see this transformational conclusion. And comment below with your thoughts and theories about this enlightening finale.